Since the last episode, I have managed to accidentally get myself 96,000 cash, mostly from delivering up to the coal mine. And with that money, is something that I want to do is buy a locomotive, and I'm thinking about buying the P-class locomotive. And I do not know what to name it yet. All I know is that I'm going to number it number 2. So list in the comments what I should be naming this locomotive in the wagon names, and I'll rename it at the next episode. So now we have a P-class. We still have almost 70,000 cash. I could buy a H2 or a H as well, but for now that seems a bit overkill. Or I could buy this guy. But yeah. What I also want to do is finish off the industry chain by building to the final industry that I'm yet to connect to, which is the shipyard. So if I quickly just a nice industry track for us to park at and drop off the product, which, okay, it takes iron tools, coal and machinery and has an output of nothing. Seems like cordwood is the default because it says click to select wagons for loading and then it lets us load cordwood, but okay, so where do we want to go? We are rich, so monetary concerns with making a line are not going to be a big concern for us. So if I quickly just do a little study track, Bauxite mine would be about -2% from the forest camp, and then we could go from Bauxite mine here all the way up to here at like -1%. But first we do actually need an industry track at the Bauxite mine, so... And then we have an industry track built here at the Bauxite mine which we can use. I'm not sure of the best way to go, because I no longer have plans to actually use this switch for the forest camp. So potentially we could come out this way and then round it up here, which... Okay, so gradient versus curve, so let's just check. That would be about -1.5, but if we're doing a big curve that means we get more tracks, so let's just do -1. Then curve, let's say 700. Nope, wrong way. Let's also do it as a -500. Okay, that is way too shallow. -350. 350 would fit, however I am going to slightly set it down to -300, and just in case I am going to set the ballast to the 15-foot ballast. Build around this way. This actually looks like it could do with the stone embankment, then around, and then let's turn the curve to 0, and then what would the gradient be? Okay, it's about -2%, so we didn't. So actually, let's go round again at -300, but this time let's do it as -1.5%, so we hopefully don't need to do that. So we end up with a curve a bit like this, so let's turn grade off, curve off, and then just say yes. Okay, so that's -1%. Okay, so then we grade on, curve on. Let's just set that to about 500 seems okay. Actually, -1,250. Let's just do -1,000. That's too short. 1150. Yeah, that's about right. So then we can go around. We're going to zoom in. This looks like we can just go back to ballasted embankment. Ooh, we're underground, so we can switch back to straight track just to save a little bit, and then we can place this track in, and then we're connected up to the Bauxite mine. And then I did sort of initially plan to head to the quarry, but maybe we could do that off this end, and then the other end. Yep. Also, it has started to rain in game, which is very annoying because I cannot turn it off in the admin menu. The only thing I can change is daytime. So let's have a look at building around here. So we could build around up the beach, around that way, and then cut across onto here, which would make a line of 1.5%. So let's just start at 1.5%. Temporarily we will come out this way, up to here, straight track. Is any of this floating? Not yet, but it will be floating, so I'm going to set to the embankment. Then we're going to do 300. That makes sense. Probably should have started the curve earlier, but doesn't really matter. Then, because we're getting somewhat far off the ground, I'm then going to transition to the stone embankment. And then, right, so that, that grade is now 3%, which is slightly annoying. Actually, if I turn grade off, curve off, okay, apparently it's only 0.7%, which means I can do like 0.8 for just in case. I'm actually going to turn the curve off for a short little bit, and something I am just going to do to speed up track construction is I am going to yoink the locomotive, because for some reason the re-rail radius is around the player and not around the track. So we can then take this locomotive, which is very fast, and then just run around the new track. And once the new track's done, then we will take it back to the machine shop afterwards, and pick up a train, and then we can start delivering things. Oh, we're near the end. Something that I was noticing is that braking power in the first locomotive that we got, which is the starter locomotive, is kind of abysmal compared to some of the later locomotives, so that's part of why I wanted to buy one. Also, I was just rich, so spending tons of money didn't really matter. We are only down to 57k, so that shouldn't be too bad for us. Right, so if I turn curve off, grade off, what does this result in? 0.6. So let's turn this down to 0.6. Grade on, then 500, maybe. Actually, probably about 700. Bring that to about there, and then turn this off, erect a regular rail, and we have a nice 0.7. Okay, so we can actually replace this piece of track with a embankment, and then because we're just connecting nodes, we don't need the other settings, like so. And now we have a full track up to the forest camp. And something I do want to do is completely change this tunnel to the ironworks, partly so I can have a Y here, and partly because this makes no sense. I cannot break down this, and it would be a lot easier to go out this way if I wanted to connect up to the brickworks. So I might delete a lot of this track and change it up a little bit, and when I do that, I will be right back with the changes I've made. Current plan seems to be delete this piece of track, make it a switch, and then figure out a way to make a Y. And instead of doing this squiggle and connecting up to the, for simplicity, we'll just say the top end of the screen is north. So we're going to not connect to the north end of this ironworks, we're going to connect to the south end. And then the north end is going to do a nice big loop around and connect to the base of the distillery at hopefully a gentler gradient so we can brake on the way down. And then the distillery will come out of the northeast side, and instead of to the ironworks, it will try to bring it round to the brickworks, connect it into the gradient up to the iron and coal mine, just so that we can then get to the ironworks easier, and potentially also this bauxite mine, which will make some trips nicer to do. but that itself is not given. So one of the big issues with this tunnel is that it was built in pretty much just two giant pieces that cost a lot of money. So you get that piece, you get a tiny little piece, and then you get that piece. And look at that, we're back up to 62,000 approximately. Oh, we've got another little exit piece. So that tunnel was kind of atrocious and horrendous to go through. So glad to see it gone, to be honest. I'm going to delete that track, which is a very bad idea. I'm going to delete this track, which then does mean that the ironworks and the distillery are now isolated industries again, but we have 64,500 cash and we are doing a building episode, so those are not major concerns anymore. Something really annoying is that this switch is floating, so I will later, probably off camera, go in and put some industry track, no rail underneath it. Okay, we have a Y in place, which is going to be useful for turning trains around. And then we can take the end of the Y, and then we can figure out how to connect it here. At about a 1% grade, so let's start off with minus 750 curve, grade on. And actually I'm going to switch over to first person to figure this out. And I suppose the sprint is a nice feature to have. I feel like it's not fast enough, and it would be nice to see in settings something that said sprint speed, and then we could change the speed of the sprint, because it's an increased speed to normal, but it's not humongously fast. And I'm not directly proposing that we implement railroad as sprint, which is 40 miles an hour, but I am suggesting just a slight speed up to make traversing the map slightly less annoying to have to do. So if we come out this way. Okay, we are building tunnels, so I might run out of cash, considering that the entire mine route cost about 70k combined, and a lot of that was spent on the tunneling. Okay, so what is the gradient here now? It's about 0.8, so we'll leave it at 1%. And then we'll start to curve it at about 500 inwards. Is 500 going to be... No, what about 400? 450. Okay, I think for now 450 will work. In straight track, let's just... Oh, and we're out of the tunnel again. It's a nice short little squiggly in the tunnel. Now we're going to cut out trees. We're going to keep building, and if we build in short sections, then that means that basically if you ever need to rework pieces of track, then it's all in small amounts, so you don't have to delete a humongous section and redo it. In Railroads Online, when they changed from the old spline system with limited length to the new spline system, it took my brain a while to adjust from building very short splines to very long splines, because I used to build a very nice track, but it was very short splines. But then when the new system came around, I got so used to building with the long splines. I have built this track way too high up. So set the grade to 0. What is that? Could be... Okay, so I'm going to redo this curve again, but this time lower gradient. There we go. Then what is the grade up to the industry? It's about 0.2%. And yeah, that is the route that I want, so let's build that. And now we have a new way up to the ironworks. Forest camp, curve round like this. And then... I'm thinking about routes that we could take from, like, ironworks into the tunnel. So... Okay. Considering tunnel ideas would be like a secondary route most of the time, let's temporarily do grade on and then like curve minus 350, just to try and avoid... Oh, no, that's not going to work. So minus 280 at the sharpest. It's going to cut into the mountain. And it does actually look like it would cut very close to the existing thing. So if we accidentally find the other track whilst we're building this, then we'll see about rebuilding the other track. How high is the distillery? It's about minus 2.5%. Let's do grade on temporarily, and not the screen. Let's do minor, because we are planning on mostly building in tunnels, so we can set it to straight track. And we've broken floor. Okay, we are further away than I initially thought from that tunnel, so would that connect? Okay, that might connect up that way, so we'll leave that switch where it is. And what way are we trying to... I did just realise that if we're going to connect up to the other tunnel, then we could actually end up building a Y, which would end up there. So if we continue building around this way, we're going to build into another tunnel. We're down to 37,000 cash, which is slightly annoying, but right, if we just do another check. Okay, that has gone down to minus 1.5, which is super good news, because it means that we get a lot of just long braking distance. And you might question why I'm not going to go back and rebuild the other stuff, but if I build it at a different height, we're going to tunnel differently, and that's going to cost a lot more, and most of the track is designed to be like 2% anyways, so it shouldn't really matter. Okay, so I'm going to build a short segment there at the end of the tunnel. Then we're going to build a long, like 1,500 size curve around this way, and then we're going to actually reduce that to like 500 here with another tunnel segment that has brought us down to 28,000 cash, which makes me glad at the start of the episode we didn't buy the other locomotive, because that would have bankrupted us. And so yeah, we now only need to be at like -1 now, so I don't want to make that all in one go, so let's turn curve to 0. Actually, we were going to build off this node, but I do think that the plan has changed, and then we can build off the other node instead. That was expensive. And then we're going to go through, and this looks like a sensible curve, and that's only -1%, so a lot of colonists will be able to brake with when coming into the distillery. And just to ponder, what would the gradient be like? Okay, it'd be like -0.5 if we tried to connect it up to the brickworks. So let's do like -0.5, and then curve on, and then we're going to set the curve to say 3. Okay, so if we actually set the curve to 280, which is the limit I'll go to, yeah, that'd fit within the boundary conditions. Then we could zoop it up and all the way around to the brickworks. So let's quickly prepare the brickworks. Track objects. Oh, oops. Track objects, right turn. Forward piece of track. And then that can be one bit of it. And then here, I might take that out, plop that piece of track in, and then we can have a Y, potentially. It's like curve, like U. Alright, let's actually build this further out. Actually, we don't want the rail to curve. Instead, we want it to be like -3,000. Build mode on, U. There we go, that looks a lot better. Have our track switch. Then, how does that look? That looks sharp. I'll probably remake this section later. I just realised that's all going downgrade unnecessarily, because we're gonna redo that. Something strange is that even though I set toggle daylight cycle to disabled, it still cycled around a bit, which I do not know why. And I kind of want to see that either changed or made more clear what it's actually doing when I set that setting. We are down to 18,000 cash. So grade like, what's the curve like? Okay, so the gradient is still 0.4, so we'll set the grade to 0.5. Curve round like 280, yeah, that works. Okay, we've made a tunnel, so I'm gonna try to bring my character over to the tunnel. Then we'll connect up to the distillery. Then all of that will connect up to the ironworks, and then we'll have a hugely interconnected map, although we are down to about 14,500 cash. The cash situation does make me less likely to think that we are going to be able to finish the tunnel intact. But if we hadn't bought the locomotive, then we would have, but I'm not going to sell the locomotive, and I don't really regret buying the locomotive, just because some of the trains, I kid you not, we were on a downhill, and the old locomotive still couldn't start them going, which I didn't even know was possible, that the engine was too weak to push a load downhill, let alone on, like, be unable to on flat ground. But yeah, that's why we have the new locomotive. It's one of the strongest, and it is humongously fast, which should mean that we can climb the 2% all the way up to the coal and iron mine in a reasonable amount of time, as opposed to like an hour for 2 trips up and down. Yes, we are very likely to go bankrupt in this tunnel, now that I think about it, because it is staying underground for quite a while, despite my tryings to curve it out of here. And if I actually turn curve and grade off, what's that like? Okay, so that is like 0.3, so I can boop and boop. And actually we can curve off, try to build out to there. Oh, we're down to 6,000. That is wonderful. So minus 0.3, and then we're going to curve to 80, 6,000, 5,700. I'm gonna set it to the ballast embankment, just in case. And then where does that track poke out? There. Okay. Not happy with that, I might round it off later, but at least we now have a track that goes up, curves around, has a Y. We can enter the brickworks, we can enter the 2% up from here. And then we also have new ironworks route, which I'm a lot more happy with. And new forest camp route. We're not yet going to connect the ironworks up to this. That's going to be a thing for next episode. So let's for now just place a little stub there with some buffers. But yeah, we're down to 3,754 cash, so that connecting up to make another Y, and then a few Ys in that, is either a never thing or a next episode thing. Quarry, potentially in future, might connect up to Bauxite mine shipyard route, but not right now. And off camera I will do some deliveries to the shipyard. I have no idea what's going to happen if I deliver products to the shipyard, because, I mean, there's piers here, so it suggests that there could be something exciting. If not, then you won't see anything at the start of next episode. If there is something exciting, I will be recording it, just in case. But anyways, now seems like a good point to end off. Goodbye.